The quantum sensors aboard the Arcturian vessel Luminous Harmony detected the anomaly long before visual confirmation. Commander Zix Val's tendrils rippled with anticipation as the readings stabilized on his neural interface. Unknown vessel, approximately 3 kiloparsecs from the Cygnus buffer zone, reported Science Officer Ithlora, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with analytical patterns. Composition suggests primitive metallurgy. Significant radiation signature. Zix Val's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of skepticism among his kind. Primitive metallurgy doesn't achieve interstellar capability. Recalibrate. Calibration verified, Ithlora insisted. The vessel appears to be using nuclear fission for auxiliary power. Radioactive signatures indicate weapons-grade material. The command deck fell silent. The Galactic Concord had eliminated nuclear technologies millennia ago, considering them barbaric relics of evolutionary adolescence. Defensive posture, inquired Tactical Liaison Verntal. None, Zix Val decided. We represent 17 species and 9,000 years of peaceful expansion. We will follow First Contact Protocol Gamma-6. The Luminous Harmony adjusted its approach vector, its crystalline hull refracting starlight, in the ceremonial pattern of peaceful intent. The ship's sentient systems composed a mathematical greeting sequence designed to establish communication through universal constants. Aboard the UES Relentless, Lieutenant Sophia Chen's monitoring station erupted with alerts. "Captain, we've got company," she announced, fingers dancing across haptic interfaces. "Unknown configuration, no match in Alliance databases." Captain Alina Savos abandoned her inspection of the propulsion deck, taking the emergency lift to the bridge. By the time she arrived, the tactical display showed a vessel that defied human engineering principles, a geometric impossibility of crystal and light that moved with liquid grace. "What the hell is that?" she demanded, dropping into the command chair. "Unknown, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Rashid. "It's broadcasting some kind of mathematical sequence on multiple bands. And it's scanning us deeply." Alina's expression hardened. Humanity's first interstellar war with the Proxima Coalition had started with seemingly innocent scans that mapped defensive weaknesses. "Shields up. Weapon systems on standby." "Captain," protested Dr. Amara Okafor, the xenolinguistics specialist, "this could be a first contact situation." "The mathematical sequence could be a cyber-attack vector," interrupted Security Chief Kovacs. "They're hitting our navigational shields with targeted energy beams." "Those aren't weapons," Okafor insisted. "The energy signature is too diffuse." The bridge erupted in specialist crosstalk, each department reading the situation through their professional lens. Alina raised a hand, silencing them. "We're 50 light-years from the nearest human outpost," she said quietly. "If this goes wrong, no one's coming to save us." "Mr. Wei, status of our stealth systems." Lieutenant Commander Jackson Wei looked up from his engineering station. "Compromised, Captain. Their scans are penetrating our outer electromagnetic deflection grid. They can see us." Alina straightened her uniform jacket, a gesture her crew recognized as her preparation for difficult decisions. "Open a channel, all frequencies." And Lieutenant Yoshida, calculate an emergency jump trajectory. "If this goes sideways, I want options." On the Luminous Harmony, alarms chimed with harmonious urgency. "The vessel is activating energy fields," reported Verntal, his voice modulating with concern. "Defensive barriers engaging. They've interpreted our greeting scan as hostile intent." "Impossible," breathed Zix Val. "No species reacts to mathematical harmony with defensive posturing." First Contact Specialist, Kelnera's voice carried the weight of realization. Unless they evolved in a predatory environment where unknown contact historically meant threat. The Arcturian command staff exchanged horrified glances as the implications settled over them. They had just encountered something unprecedented in Concord records, a spacefaring species that evolved without outgrowing its survival instincts. The human vessel now hung against the starfield like a clenched fist, its weapon ports illuminated in readiness patterns that required no translation. First contact had gone very wrong indeed. "They're responding, Captain," Dr. Okafor announced, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted her translation algorithms. "It's complex. Multidimensional data packets with mathematical constants woven into. I think it might be poetry." Elena Savos leaned forward. "Poetry. The structure suggests cultural information encoded in harmonics," Okafor explained. "They're not just communicating. They are trying to introduce themselves through art, or obfuscate their actual intentions," Kovacs muttered. A holographic display materialized above the command table, undulating patterns of light representing the alien transmission. Lieutenant Chen whistled low. "Those energy patterns would fry our standard comm arrays if they weren't modulated. Whatever they are, they've got power to spare." Elena studied the shifting display. 20 years of military service had taught her to trust her instincts. These patterns didn't feel threatening. They felt eager. "Dr. Okafor, transmit our first contact package. Audio, visual, mathematical primer. Let's see if we can establish common ground." On the luminous harmony, the human response caused immediate confusion. Their reply contains sounds, reported communication specialist Trelvox, adjusting his auditory receptors in discomfort, crude pressure wave variations, and simplistic binary data. Their mathematics barely extends to fourth-dimensional calculations. Zixval drifted closer to the sensory array. "They communicate through atmospheric vibration." "Apparently," Trelvox replied. "And their data transmission efficiency is concerning. They're using primitive electromagnetic carrier waves with linear encoding." First contact specialist, Kelnera's bioluminescence dimmed thoughtfully. "Yet they've achieved interstellar travel. Fascinating contradiction." The situation complicated further when the luminous harmony's long-range sensors detected 3 approaching vessels, support ships from the Concorde's expeditionary fleet, responding to automated notifications about potential first contact. "The human vessel is altering its position," Tactical Lays and Verntal reported. "They've detected our reinforcements." Aboard the Relentless, the atmosphere tightened with tension. 3 more contacts, same configuration as the first, Lieutenant Yoshida reported. "They're moving to surround us in a triangular formation. Containment pattern," Chief Kovacs stated flatly. "Classic encirclement tactic." Elena's jaw tightened. "Sound general quarters. Bring main batteries online." "Captain," Dr. Okafor protested, "we're still interpreting their initial communication. This could be a misunderstanding." "Yes," Elena finished, "but I'm not gambling with this ship or crew." Lieutenant Wei, reactor status. "Main fusion reactor at nominal capacity, Captain. Secondary fission backup standing by. Give me everything you've got." Tactical, calculate a maneuver to break their containment pattern. Lieutenant Yoshida's hands flew across her console, plotting multi-vector thrust pattern Zeta 9, Captain. "It'll strain our inertial compensators to their limits." Crew status. "Medical bay prepped for high casualties," reported Chief Medical Officer Devi Patel through the comm system, recommending stims for all bridge personnel. Elena nodded grimly. "Make it so." What followed shocked the Arcturian fleet. The human vessel, previously stationary, suddenly erupted with multi-vector thrust, rotating on 3 axes simultaneously while accelerating in a corkscrew pattern that defied prediction algorithms. The maneuver was so complex that the Arcturian tactical systems calculated it should tear the vessel apart or render its biological crew unconscious. "Impossible," Verntal whispered as the human battleship positioned itself with weapon ports, facing all 3 Arcturian support vessels, having broken their containment formation in seconds. No biological species can withstand such rotational forces. On the bridge of the luminous harmony, Zixval watched with growing alarm as the human vessel stabilized in an offensive posture. Their biology must be extraordinary, murmured Science Officer Ithlara, or their compensatory technology far more advanced than their other systems suggest. Or both, Kelnera suggested. Commander, I believe we've encountered something unprecedented. A species that evolved within a gravity well so demanding that their physiology adapted to extremes, yet whose technological development focused primarily on warfare rather than biological transcendence. Zix-Val's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of deep distress among his kind. Transmit emergency non-aggression signals, he ordered, and prepare contingency retreat vectors. The impossible reality was becoming clear. They had encountered a spacefaring predator species. We have mathematical concordance, Dr. Okafor announced, her voice rising with excitement. They've adapted their communication protocols to match our binary structure. We can establish limited translation. The bridge crew exchanged cautious glances as Captain Savos considered the implications. Put it through, she ordered. The main view screen flickered, revealing a being unlike anything humanity had encountered. Commander Zix-Val's 4-eyed, tentacled form floated in what appeared to be a luminescent mist. When he spoke, his words were translated into text while his actual voice produced harmonics that seemed to vibrate the air itself. Greetings, vessel of unknown origin. We are the Arcturian Expeditionary Corps, representatives of the Galactic Concord. Our approach was meant in peace. We request cessation of defensive posturing. Elena straightened her uniform. This is Captain Elena Savos of the United Earth ship Relentless. Your vessels have surrounded mine in what we interpret as a tactical formation. Withdraw to minimum safe distance, and we can discuss peaceful intentions. The translator struggled with Zix-Val's response, his tentacles moving in patterns that seemed to supplement his speech. Formation, misunderstood. Triangular approach is ceremonial welcome. We apologize for cultural misunderstanding. Elena exchanged glances with her security chief. Kovacs gave a slight nod. The alien's body language, alien as it was, didn't register as deceptive. Stand down to yellow alert, Elena ordered. Maintain shields but power down weapons. Dr. Okafor, enhance translation protocols. After tense negotiations, both sides agreed to a formal meeting. The Arcturians requested permission to send a diplomatic shuttle to the Relentless, a proposal that triggered immediate security concerns. We can't allow unknown biological entities aboard without proper quarantine, Dr. Patil insisted during the emergency staff meeting. Their technology could pose infiltration risks, added Kovacs. Who knows what their diplomatic shuttle might contain? Elena weighed the risks against the historic opportunity. We'll establish protocols. Docking Bay 3, full containment fields, limited contact. We didn't come 50 light-years from Earth to hide behind our shields. The Arcturian diplomatic shuttle emerged from the luminous harmony like a droplet of liquid crystal, its propulsion system seemingly operating on principles that defied human understanding. Lieutenant Wei monitored its approach from engineering, his brow furrowed. No detectable exhaust, no radiation signature. Either they're masking it somehow, or they've developed a propulsion system that doesn't follow conventional physics. The shuttle glided into Docking Bay 3 with perfect precision, settling onto the deck with barely a sound. The bay's atmospheric processors kicked into overdrive, analyzing every molecule for potential threats. Atmospheric composition within shuttle is primarily helium with traces of xenon, reported the environmental officer. Temperature approximately 40 Kelvin. 40 Kelvin, Dr. Patil exclaimed. That's minus 233 Celsius. The docking bay crew, already in environmental suits, watched as the shuttle's crystal surface rippled and formed an opening. 5 Arcturians emerged, each enclosed in a transparent environmental suit that appeared to be made of the same living crystal as their vessels. Senior Envoy Tilmira led the delegation, his 4 eyes widening within his protective helmet as he observed the human docking bay. To Arcturian sensibilities, the environment was chaotic. Exposed machinery, visible fasteners, manual controls, And most shockingly, humans working in what appeared to be crude fabric garments rather than proper environmental isolation. The delegation has arrived, Lieutenant Chen announced on the bridge. Captain, they look concerned. Elena rose from her chair. Welcome party with me. Dr. Okafor, bring the upgraded translator. Let's go meet our guests. The meeting occurred in a hastily prepared conference room adjacent to the docking bay. The Arcturians remained in their environmental suits, clustered together as if for protection. Captain Sevos entered with her team, removing her helmet in a gesture of openness that caused visible distress among the aliens. You expose your respiratory system directly to ship atmosphere, Til Nera asked through the translator, his voice carrying unmistakable horror. Standard procedure aboard human vessels, Elena replied. Our life support systems maintain Earth normal conditions. But the microbiological contaminants, Til Nera insisted. The particulate matter, the fluctuating gaseous composition. Dr. Patel raised an eyebrow. Our immune systems handle those quite effectively. The revelation that humans deliberately exposed themselves to unfiltered environments sent ripples of discomfort through the Arcturian delegation. Their own species had evolved in the calm depths of Arcturus Ivy's vast helium oceans, protected from radiation and temperature variations by kilometers of liquid gas. Their civilization had developed environmental isolation from its earliest stages. Perhaps, Elena suggested, noticing their discomfort, we should focus on establishing diplomatic protocols before cultural exchange. Before Til Nera could respond, a shudder ran through the Relentless. Alert klaxons blared as the ship's internal gravity briefly fluctuated. Bridge to Captain, Lieutenant Yoshida's voice came through the comm. New contacts detected. 3 vessels just emerged from some kind of fold space. Configuration unknown. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Elena's expression hardened. Put it through here. The conference room display activated, revealing a being that caused even the Arcturians to recoil. 8 compound eyes gleamed from a chitinous face, mandibles clicking as it spoke in a language that sounded like breaking glass. Translation coming through, Dr. Okafor announced, her voice tight. It's a demand for surrender. The command center fell silent as the translation of the new arrival's message scrolled across the display. Attention inferior vessels. This is Hive General Kittik of the Droxy Hegemony. You have entered claimed territory. Surrender your vessels and prepare for processing. Resistance is metabolically inefficient. Captain Sevos studied the arthropodal alien on screen, noting the militaristic insignia adorning its chitinous exoskeleton. Dr. Okafor, what do we know about the Droxy Hegemony? Before she could respond, Til Nera stepped forward, his environmental suit's crystal surface pulsing with agitated patterns. The Droxy are a dominant predatory species from the Cetus arm, he explained, voice modulator struggling with his rapid speech. They consider all non-Droxy life to be resource material. They do not negotiate. They do not accept surrender. They process other sentience. Process. Lieutenant Kovacs asked sharply. For consumption, labor, or raw biological materials, Til Nera clarified, his 4 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns of distress. The Concord maintains distance protocols with Droxy space. We must have drifted too close to their territory during our encounter. Elena processed this information with military efficiency. Lieutenant Chen, what's their weapons capability? Energy signatures off the scale, Captain. Reading plasma-based weapon systems and some kind of gravitational manipulation technology. Their hull configuration suggests extensive armor. The senior Arcturian diplomat was already moving toward the door. Captain Savos, we must return to our vessel and initiate emergency withdrawal procedures. The Concord has established survival protocols for Droxy encounters. You're running? Elena asked, disbelief evident in her voice. It is the only logical response, Til Nera insisted. The Droxy overwhelm through superior numbers and biological adaptability. They have never been defeated in direct confrontation. Elena exchanged glances with her officers, reading the resolve in their expressions. Well, they've never encountered humans before. Lieutenant Kovacs, escort our guests back to their shuttle. We'll cover your withdrawal. Tilnera froze mid-movement. Cover our. You intend to engage the Droxy. We intend to survive, Elena stated flatly. And in our experience, running from predators only encourages pursuit. The Arcturian delegation returned to their shuttle in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the human response. As they departed, Commander Zix Val received their urgent transmission. They intend to fight, he asked incredulously, against Droxy combat vessels. Their captain showed no biological stress indicators suggesting fear, reported Tilnera. They appear to be initiating combat preparations with enthusiasm. On the Relentless's bridge, Elena had indeed shifted into combat mode. Years of military service had honed her into a weapon as surely as the battleship she commanded. Tactical assessment. Lieutenant Yoshida. 3 Droxy vessels, blade configuration. Their central ship masses approximately twice our tonnage. Energy readings suggest they outclass us in raw power, but their maneuverability appears limited by their size. Weaknesses. Their scanning emissions suggest they rely heavily on energy shields. Physical projectiles might penetrate where energy weapons would be dissipated. Elena nodded. Load all railgun batteries with tungsten core penetrators. Prepare nuclear-tipped javelin missiles, but hold for my command. Engineering status. Lieutenant Wei's voice came through the comm, the background hum of the engine room punctuating his report. Main reactor at 110% capacity, Captain. I've rerouted emergency power to forward shields and weapon systems. We can sustain maximum combat operations for 22 minutes before risking core instability. Make it 30, Elena ordered. Communications, hail the Arcturian vessel. Commander Zix Val's image appeared on screen, his tentacles writhing with evident distress. Captain Savos, my diplomatic team has returned. We are initiating emergency fold space calculations for immediate withdrawal. Commander, fall back behind our position, Elena instructed, her voice calm despite the battle preparations happening around her. The Relentless will engage the Droxy vessels while you make your escape. Zix Val's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in confusion. You would sacrifice your vessel for ours. We have only just met. We have established no alliance, no trade agreements, no mutual defense pacts. Elena's expression remained unchanged. That's not how humans operate, Commander. We don't need paperwork to do the right thing. The concept was so foreign to Arcturian diplomatic procedure that Zix Val momentarily lost the ability to respond. His species, while peaceful, operated on carefully calculated reciprocity. The human concept of defending strangers without established benefit exchange protocols simply did not compute. As the Arcturian vessel moved to position itself behind the Relentless, the Droxy ships began their approach. Lieutenant Chen noticed something on her sensor readings. Captain, I'm detecting communication between the Droxy vessels and the Arcturian ship. They're scanning each other. On the luminous harmony, Science Officer Ithlara confirmed the observation. The Droxy are accessing our historical databases through our communication protocols. They are learning about humans. The senior officers watched in growing horror as the Droxy ships suddenly altered their formation, accelerating toward the Relentless with newfound urgency. They've designated the humans as primary targets, Verntal reported. Their communication patterns indicate alarm. They consider the humans a Category 1 threat species. That's impossible, Zix Val whispered. The Droxy classify no species as Category 1. They do now, Ithlara replied, watching as the Relentless moved to intercept the approaching Droxy vessels. They fear the humans. All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. Captain Savos's voice echoed through the Relentless, triggering a transformation throughout the vessel. Civilian specialists retreated to secure compartments, while military personnel moved with practiced efficiency to combat positions. In engineering, Lieutenant Y activated the battleship's seldom-used combat systems. Radiation shielding slid into place around critical components. Power conduits glowed as energy reserves flooded into weapon capacitors. "Capacitors charge," he reported. "Railgun systems online. Torpedo tubes 1 through 6 ready for loading." On the bridge, Lieutenant Yoshida's hands danced across tactical controls. Targeting solutions acquired. Primary Droxy vessel designated Alpha, secondary vessels Beta and Gamma. "Hold fire," Alina commanded, studying the approaching formation. "Let them make the first move. What's the status of the Arcturian vessel?" "They've positioned themselves 20,000 kilometers behind us," Captain, reported Lieutenant Chen. "Their engines are powering up for what appears to be full space transition, but their calculations seem extensive." Dr. Okafor looked up from her communications station. "They're being thorough. Their communications indicate they require precise calculations to avoid spatial distortions." Elena nodded grimly. "Then we buy them time. Helm, bring us to bearing 045 Mark 030. Full impulse. Let's draw the Droxy away from the Arcturians." The Relentless surged forward, its massive fusion engines propelling it directly toward the approaching Droxy formation. On the luminous Harmony, the Arcturian command staff watched in disbelief. "They're advancing," Zix-Ball whispered, "against superior numbers." "Not just advancing," Tactical Liaison Verntal corrected, his tendrils rippling with agitation. "They're accelerating, moving to intercept course." Science Officer Ithlara studied the sensor readings with growing fascination. Their reactor output has increased by 47%. They appear to be diverting life support power to weapon systems, reducing life support during combat. First Contact Specialist Kelnera gasped. "But that would mean their crew is operating in degraded environmental conditions." "The humans," Ithlara observed quietly, "appear willing to suffer for tactical advantage." The Droxy struck first. Green-tinged energy beams lanced from their lead vessel, striking the Relentless's forward shields with devastating force. The human battleship shuddered under the impact, shield harmonics fluctuating dangerously. "Forward shields at 62%, reported Lieutenant Chen. "Direct hit to sections 17 through 22. "Casualties," Elena demanded, gripping her command chair as the ship rocked again. "Medical reporting 12 injuries in forward sections," Lieutenant Kovacs responded. "Damage control teams responding." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Return fire. All forward railguns, target their lead vessel's propulsion array." The Relentless's response shocked both alien fleets. Rather than employing energy weapons similar to the Droxy's, the human battleship's hull split open along previously invisible seams, revealing massive electromagnetic accelerators. With thunderous electromagnetic discharges, dozens of tungsten cord projectiles erupted toward the Droxy flagship, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The Droxy shields, calibrated for energy weapon defense, failed catastrophically against the kinetic assault. Tungsten penetrators punched through their hull like spears through paper, venting atmosphere and destroying critical systems. "Direct hits," Yoshida reported, allowing herself a tight smile. "Target Alpha's propulsion systems damage. Their shield generator is fluctuating." The Droxy response was immediate and brutal. All 3 vessels concentrated fire on the Relentless, their targeting algorithms zeroing in on the railgun batteries that had proven so effective. "They're adapting," Elena realized. "Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7. Engineering, reroute power to dorsal shields." The massive battleship executed a maneuver that defied its apparent mass limitations, rolling to present its most heavily armored surface to the incoming fire while maintaining weapon lock on its targets. On the luminous Harmony, the Arcturian command staff watched the battle unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Their tactical doctrines are incomprehensible," Verntal admitted. "They deliberately expose damaged sections to draw fire away from operational weapons. They're using damage as a tactical advantage," Ithlara agreed. sacrificing structural integrity for positional superiority. Commander Zix-Val's eyes never left the tactical display. Our fold space calculations complete. 93%, the navigation officer reported. We require 7 more minutes for safe transition. The human vessel cannot survive 7 more minutes at current combat intensity, Verntal stated flatly. Zix-Val made a decision that violated centuries of Arcturian non-intervention protocols. Divert power from fold space calculations to secondary systems. Prepare to assist the human vessel. Back on the Relentless, the situation had deteriorated rapidly. Multiple decks reported damage, emergency force fields barely containing atmosphere in breached sections. In engineering, Lieutenant Wei worked frantically amid smoke and sparking conduits. Captain, reactor containment is holding, but barely, he reported. We've lost 3 power distribution nodes and auxiliary life support is offline in sections 29 through 36. What about the main guns? Alina demanded, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead where a console explosion had sent debris flying. Railguns 1 and 4 still operational. The rest are offline or destroyed. Alina exchanged glances with Lieutenant Yoshida, silent understanding passing between them. Load the javelins. All tubes. Yoshida's eyes widened slightly. The javelin missiles carried tactical nuclear warheads, devastating at close range, but equally dangerous to the firing vessel. Target lock acquired, she reported after a moment, professionalism overriding concern. Tubes 1 through 6 ready. Fire. 6 missiles erupted from the Relentless's launch tubes, streaking toward the damaged Droxy flagship. The alien vessel attempted evasive maneuvers, but the missile's guidance systems adjusted with merciless precision. The resulting explosion temporarily blinded optical sensors on both the Arcturian and remaining Droxy vessels. When the radiation surge cleared, the Droxy flagship was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and debris. On the Droxy secondary vessels, a rapid command exchange took place, one that the Arcturians intercepted and translated with growing astonishment. Tactical reassessment. Human vessels employ prohibited fission-based weaponry. Threat classification. Omega-level extinction risk. Disengage immediately. Repeat, disengage immediately. The 2 remaining Droxy ships abruptly broke combat, executing emergency maneuvers to escape the human battleship's weapons range. They're retreating, Lieutenant Chen reported, disbelief evident in her voice. The Droxy are actually running away. The bridge crew of the Relentless, battered and surrounded by damaged systems, exchanged stunned glances. In the silence that followed, Captain Savos allowed herself a small, grim smile. Secure from general quarters, she ordered. Damage control teams to priority sections. And someone get engineering to stop that damn reactor from overloading. On the luminous Harmony, the Arcturian command staff stared at their sensors in silence. Finally, Science Officer Ithlera gave voice to what they were all thinking. In all recorded history, no species has ever forced a Droxy tactical retreat. Until now. The Relentless drifted into the shadow of a massive asteroid, its damaged hull occasionally venting small plumes of escaping atmosphere that crystallized instantly in the vacuum. The luminous Harmony maintained formation nearby, its crystalline surface pulsing with energy patterns as it analyzed the human vessel. Structural integrity compromised in 17 locations, reported Lieutenant Wei from Engineering, his voice ragged with exhaustion. Primary power grid operating at 38% capacity. Life support stable in sections housing personnel, but we've had to seal off nearly a third of the ship. In the makeshift medical bay, the primary facility having been destroyed in the battle, Dr. Patil moved from patient to patient, her medical team working with grim efficiency. 27 wounded, 6 critical, she reported when Captain Savos arrived, her own arm in a temporary cast. Jenkins and Azes won't make it without surgical intervention beyond our current capabilities. Alina's face remained impassive, but those who knew her could see the weight of command in her eyes. Do what you can, Doctor. Engineering teams are prioritizing power to medical. Captain, Lieutenant Chen called over the comm. The Arcturian vessel is hailing us. Commander Zixval's image appeared on the nearest functional display. The Arcturian's tentacles moved in patterns that the translation software now recognized as indicating deep concern. Captain Savos, our sensors indicate critical damage to your vessel. We offer assistance. Elena raised an eyebrow. I thought your protocols prevented intervention in potential contamination situations. Protocols have flexibility in exceptional circumstances, Zixval replied carefully. Your defense against the Droxy constitutes such an exception. Within hours, the previously insurmountable biological barriers began to dissolve in the face of practical necessity. Arcturian repair drones, spherical devices that appeared to be made of the same living crystal as their ships, swarmed through the Relentless's damaged sections. Their efficiency in sealing hull breaches and repairing critical systems amazed the human engineers. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Wei led a team to address the battleship's most pressing concern: radiation leakage from damaged reactor shielding. He studied the schematics in the auxiliary control room, surrounded by his engineering staff. The primary coolant loop is compromised, he explained. Someone needs to manually reroute the secondary loop through the emergency shunt system. The radiation levels in that section will exceed 80 sieverts, his assistant pointed out. That's fatal exposure in minutes. Weed nodded grimly. That's why I'm going myself. Kowalski, Jones, you're with me. We'll draw straws to determine who enters the high radiation zone. The Arcturian engineering liaison, Mev Toril, who had been observing the humans' repair efforts, recoiled visibly. You propose sending personnel into lethal radiation? He asked, his translation module struggling to convey his horror. Why not use remote manipulation systems? Because our remotes were destroyed in the battle, Wei explained matter-of-factly. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty. We have isolation drones that cold. How long would it take to program them for our systems? Wei interrupted. Approximately 7 hours to establish compatible interfaces. The reactor will go critical in less than 3, Wei said, ending the discussion. We don't have that luxury. What followed shocked the Arcturian observers to their core. Wei and his team donned what appeared to be woefully inadequate radiation protection suits and methodically calculated exposure times and escape routes. Then they drew plastic straws, with Wei himself ending up with the shortest, designating him for the most dangerous part of the mission. The human voluntarily selected the highest probability of radiation poisoning. Mev Toril reported to the Arcturian command staff, who were monitoring the situation. They have calculated that Engineer Wei will absorb approximately 30 sieverts during the procedure. That guarantees cellular damage and likely organ failure, Science Officer Ithlara noted. Why wouldn't the captain prevent this? First contact specialist Kelnera, who had been studying human behavior most closely, replied softly. Because she understands that, among humans, the right to sacrifice oneself for others is considered sacred. Wei's team succeeded. The reactor stabilized, though the cost was evident as Wei was carried to medical, his skin already showing signs of acute radiation syndrome. When Dr. Paddle grimly informed Captain Savos that their radiation treatments were insufficient for exposure of this magnitude, an unexpected offer came from the Arcturians. Our medical technology can neutralize cellular radiation damage. Commander Zixval informed Elena. We request permission to transport your affected crew members to our medical facilities. Elena studied the alien commander thoughtfully. You'd bring humans aboard your vessel. I thought biological contamination was your primary concern. It appears, Zixval replied, his tentacles forming what the translation software now identified as the pattern for philosophical resignation, that there are principles that transcend biological protocols. While the human medical cases were transferred to the Arcturian vessel, repair efforts continued on the Relentless. Human engineers, working alongside Arcturian technology specialists, began integrating compatible alien components into damaged systems. The solutions they developed were neither purely human nor Arcturian, but something new, hybrid technologies that combine human ingenuity with Arcturian elegance. They modify our technology without hesitation, Mev Toril observed with fascination. They adapt it in ways we never considered. Because they evolved solving problems with limited resources, Kelnera replied. While we seek perfection, they seek functionality. As both vessels gradually returned to operational status, a new term began circulating among the Arcturian crew. Katan Vexabla. The human translation software initially struggled with the concept, before eventually rendering it as beautiful monsters, beings capable of both terrible violence and transcendent compassion, often in the same moment. It wasn't entirely complimentary, but neither was it entirely wrong. The journey to the Concord Central Hub took 11 days by conventional drive, the Relentless's fold space capability having been destroyed in the battle. The Arcturians could have arrived in hours but chose to match pace with the human vessel, a gesture Captain Savos recognized as a newfound respect. As they approached their destination, even the battle-hardened human crew fell silent. The Concord Central Hub defied human architectural understanding, a vast ring structure surrounding an artificial star, its surface comprised of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to flow into each other despite their impossible angles. "My God," breathed Dr. Okafor, staring at the main view screen. "It's beautiful." "And big," Lieutenant Kovacs added pragmatically. "That structure could house billions." "It does," Commander Zix Val confirmed via comlink. The hub serves as the central governing location for 17 member species across 3 spiral arms. Captain Savos, I must warn you, our arrival has caused considerable agitation among the Concord High Council. Elena's expression remained neutral. "Because we fought the Droxy. Because you defeated them," Zix Val corrected. "And because of how you did it. The Council has convened an emergency session to evaluate humanity's status." "Evaluate?" Elena asked sharply. "We defended ourselves, and your vessel, against unprovoked aggression. Using weapons of mass destruction," Zix Val noted. "The Concord banned nuclear technology millennia ago." As the Relentless approached its designated docking position, an escort of 12 crystalline vessels surrounded it, ostensibly an honor guard, but their weapon ports remained conspicuously open. "They're afraid of us," Lieutenant Yoshida observed quietly. "With good reason," Elena replied. "Prepare the diplomatic team. Full dress uniforms. Let's not give them any more reasons to worry." The docking procedure itself revealed the technological gulf between the societies. The Relentless's crude mechanical clamps and pressurized docking tubes seemed primitive compared to the seamless molecular bonding the Arcturian vessels employed. Human engineering, focused on functionality and redundancy, appeared brutish against the elegant efficiency of Concord technology. The diplomatic reception area, a vast crystalline chamber with walls that shifted colors in response to emotional energies, fell silent as Captain Savos entered with her team. To the assembled alien dignitaries, the humans presented a jarring contrast to their surroundings. Their rigid uniforms, physical solidity, and obvious bilateral symmetry marked them as evolutionary products of a gravity-bound, predatorial past. The Selphic Counselor, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, floated forward. "Captain Elena Savos of Earth, you stand before the High Council of the Galactic Concord as the first representative of your species. Be aware that these proceedings will determine humanity's classification status." "Classification?" Elena asked. "Whether your species represents a civilization to be welcomed, a developing species to be guided, or a threat to be contained," the counselor clarified, crystal shell pulsing with blue-white energy. "The Council has reviewed your vessel's historical database, which Commander Zix Val's team accessed during joint repair operations." Elena shot a sharp glance toward Zix Val, who at least had the grace to look abashed, his tentacles curling inward in what she now recognized as embarrassment. The chamber's walls projected images of human history, War after war, from primitive tribal conflicts to modern thermonuclear standoffs, the assembled council members recoiled as footage of devastating human conflicts played before them. 23 global-scale conflicts in the past 5 centuries alone, intoned the Pyrrhian counselor, a plant-based intelligence whose flowered appendages drooped with distress. Nuclear weapons deployed against your own populations, chemical warfare, biological agents, systematic genocide. And yet, Elena responded calmly. We survived. We learned. We grew. Did you? Asked the Sulfic counselor. Your vessel carries nuclear weapons, projectile-based mass drivers, and military protocols designed for aggressive action. Your first encounter with the Arcturians nearly resulted in combat due to your species' default assumption of hostile intent. We carry weapons because the universe is dangerous, Elena replied, her voice hardening, as the Droxy demonstrated quite effectively. The Droxy are an anomaly, the counselor dismissed. A single predatory species that the Concord contains through established buffer zones. Your species appears to have developed as if your entire evolutionary history were shaped by Droxy-like threats. Perhaps it was, Dr. Okafor interjected, stepping forward despite protocol. Earth's evolutionary history selected for adaptability in the face of constant threat. We evolved not only physically but socially to survive environments that were actively trying to kill us. The proceedings continued for hours, with various counselors presenting evidence of humanity's violent tendencies, resource consumption patterns, and territorial behaviors. The underlying question became increasingly clear. Was humanity too dangerous to be allowed unrestricted access to the wider galaxy? As the Council seemed to be reaching consensus toward heavy restrictions on human expansion, an urgent communication interrupted the proceedings. The chamber's walls shifted to deep red as a Concord Defense Force commander appeared. Emergency Priority Alpha, the commander reported, their species indeterminate behind protective armor. Long-range sensors detect a Droxy battle fleet approaching the hub. 37 vessels, including 3 Dreadnought-class ships. Their trajectory and formation suggest punitive intent. Silence fell over the chamber as the implications became clear. The Droxy, humiliated by their defeat at the hands of the Relentless, had tracked the human vessel to the Concord hub and brought overwhelming force to ensure there would be no repeat of their earlier failure. The Sulfic counselor's crystalline shell pulsed with agitation. Activate all defensive systems. Begin evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. Alert all member worlds to prepare for. How many ships do you have here? Elena interrupted, her voice cutting through the growing panic. 20 defense cruisers, the commander replied. But they are designed for peacekeeping operations, not direct combat with Droxy warships. Elena exchanged glances with her officers, a silent communication passing between them. The Relentless is still operational, she stated. Permission to return to our vessel and assist in defensive operations. The council chamber erupted in conflicting voices, but Elena's attention remained fixed on the Sulfic counselor, whose energy forms seemed to be processing multiple emotional patterns simultaneously. You would defend us? The counselor asked finally. After this proceeding questioned your very right to exist among us. Elena's response was simple. That's what humans do. The Relentless erupted from its docking cradle, emergency thrusters firing at maximum capacity. Behind it, the Concord defense vessels formed up in textbook formation, elegant, perfectly synchronized, and utterly unprepared for the approaching Droxy fleet. Tactical assessment, Elena demanded, striding onto the hastily repaired bridge. The damage from their previous encounter remained evident. Exposed circuitry, temporary patches over hull breaches, and jury-rigged control systems. 37 Droxy vessels approaching in attack formation, Lieutenant Yoshida reported. Their lead ships will be in weapons range in 17 minutes. Concord vessels are falling into defensive positions around the hub. Not very effective positions, Lieutenant Kovacs noted, studying the tactical display. They're spreading their forces too thin. They're designed for peacekeeping, not warfare, Elena replied. Lieutenant Wei, what's our combat capability? Wei's voice came through the comm, the background noise of engineering suggesting frantic activity. Main reactor stable at 79% capacity. We've got 2 functional railgun batteries and 4 missile tubes. Shields are patched but won't withstand concentrated fire for long. And the Arcturians. Commander Zix Val's vessel is moving to support position off our starboard bow, Lieutenant Chen reported. 3 additional Arcturian ships have joined formation. Elena raised an eyebrow. They're fighting with us. Commander Zix Val is requesting a direct communication link. Chen added. The Arcturian commander's image appeared on the view screen, his tentacles arranged in what Elena now recognized as a pattern of formal resolve. Captain Savos, the Arcturian contingent will follow your tactical leadership. We have limited combat experience, but our vessels possess significant defensive capabilities. Elena nodded briskly. Position your ships behind the Relentless. Your primary mission is to intercept any Droxy vessels that break through our engagement zone. As the comlink closed, Dr. Okafor looked up from her station. Captain, the Concord hub is transmitting automated evacuation protocols. They're expecting to be overrun. Elena studied the tactical display, her mind calculating probabilities and options. The odds were overwhelming. 37 Droxy warships against 1 damaged human battleship, 4 Arcturian vessels with minimal combat experience, and 20 Concord ships designed for civil enforcement rather than war. Lieutenant Yoshida, pull up the stellar cartography of this system. The tactical display shifted, showing the local spatial environment. The artificial star powering the hub, a nearby asteroid field, and the complex gravitational interactions between them. There, Elena pointed. That's where we make our stand, the gravitational shear zone between the hub and that stellar remnant. Lieutenant Yoshida frowned. Captain, navigating that region will strain our damaged systems. The gravitational fluctuations are unpredictable to conventional navigation algorithms. Elena finished. Exactly. Helm, take us in. Full combat thrust. Communications, instruct the Arcturian vessels to follow our exact trajectory. As the small defensive fleet moved toward the seemingly suicidal position, the Droxy fleet adjusted course to intercept, their formation breaking into attack clusters. They're confused by our maneuver, Lieutenant Chen noted. Their communication patterns showed disagreement among their command structure. The Relentless reached the gravitational boundary zone first, its damaged hull groaning under the strain of competing gravitational forces. Behind it, the Arcturian vessels followed with greater ease, their crystalline structures more adaptable to spatial distortions. Droxy vessels entering weapons range in 30 seconds, Yoshida reported. Hold position, Elena ordered. Wait for them to commit to the approach vector. The lead Droxy vessels, massive blade-shaped dreadnoughts, accelerated toward the seemingly trapped defenders. Their weapon systems powered up, energy signatures spiking on the Relentless's sensors. Now, Elena commanded. Full reverse thrust, emergency vector change. Deploy all remaining javelins. What followed stunned even the Arcturians, who had begun to think they understood human combat doctrine. The Relentless executed a maneuver that should have torn a ship of its design apart, using the gravitational shear zone to slingshot itself into an impossible attack position behind the lead Droxy vessels. Simultaneously, its missile tubes launched their remaining nuclear-tipped javelins, not at the Droxy ships, but into precisely calculated positions within the gravitational anomaly. The detonations created a cascading reaction in the already unstable region. Massive gravitational waves rippled outward, catching the Droxy fleet in a trap of warped spacetime. Ships were torn apart by sudden tidal forces, while others collided as local space distorted unpredictably around them. 17 Droxy vessels disabled or destroyed, Yoshida reported, her voice tight with controlled excitement. The remainder are attempting to regroup. They're adapting faster than expected, Elena noted. Lieutenant Wei, status of the main reactor. Critical, "Captain," White replied bluntly. "The gravitational maneuver overstressed our patched containment systems. We've got 20 minutes before catastrophic failure." Alina's expression didn't change. "Understood. Helm, set collision course for the Droxy command vessel. Communications, transmit evacuation order. All hands to escape pods." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. "Captain," Lieutenant Kovacs began carefully, "with our current damage level, our self-destruct yield would be insufficient to—" "I'm aware, Lieutenant," Alina interrupted. "But an uncontrolled reactor breach when we impact their command ship will be more than sufficient." Understanding dawned across the faces of her bridge crew. None moved toward the escape pods. "With respect, Captain," Lieutenant Yoshida said quietly, "will be needed to maintain targeting solutions during the approach." One by one, her officers confirmed their intentions to remain at their posts. Alina allowed herself a moment of pride before the steel returned to her expression. "Very well. Lieutenant Chen, open a channel to the Arcturian vessels. Their structural integrity should withstand the aftermath. They need to collect our escape pods." Before she could transmit the order, the Relentless's sensors detected a power surge unlike anything they had encountered before. From the Concord hub, a coherent beam of energy lanced out, striking the heart of the regrouping Droxy fleet. Ships simply ceased to exist where the beam touched, converted to their component particles in microseconds. "The hub has weapons?" Lieutenant Kovacs asked incredulously. The answer came from an unexpected source. The Selphic Counselor's image appeared on their view screen, its crystalline shell pulsing with unfamiliar patterns. "Not weapons, Captain Savos," the counselor corrected. "The hub's star harvesting array, repurposed. We have not used it in this manner for 9,000 years." The remaining Droxy vessels, faced with technology they couldn't comprehend and tactics they couldn't predict, broke formation and retreated, vanishing into fold space in a cascade of spatial distortions. "They're running," Lieutenant Chen confirmed, disbelief evident in her voice. Alina allowed her rigid posture to relax slightly. "Lieutenant Wei, stabilize that reactor however you can. Let's try to keep this ship in one piece a little longer." 3 days later, the Relentless sat in a Concorde repair cradle, its battered hull surrounded by crystalline construction drones. On the hub's central council chamber, Captain Alina Savos stood again before the assembled species of the Galactic Concorde. This time, however, the tone was markedly different. "The defense of the hub has caused us to reconsider our initial assessment," the Selphic Counselor announced, its shell glowing with formal patterns. "Humanity displays characteristics unknown among our member species, a capacity for self-sacrifice that extends beyond rational self-interest, tactical innovation born from evolutionary pressure, and a willingness to defend others without calculation of benefit." The Pyrrhian counselor's flowering appendages extended in what Alina had learned was a gesture of respect. "We feared your capacity for violence. We failed to recognize that same capacity enables you to defend others at great personal risk. A quality," added Commander Zixval, now formally introduced as the Arcturian ambassador to humanity, "that many of our species have lost during millennia of peace." The Selphic Counselor's form brightened. "The Concorde hereby extends formal recognition to humanity as a full member species, with all rights and responsibilities therein. Furthermore, we request Earth's assistance in establishing a new branch of the Concorde, a defensive force trained in human tactical doctrines." Alina absorbed this sudden reversal with diplomatic grace, though inwardly she marveled at the rapid shift from trial to alliance. "Humanity is honored by your recognition," she replied formally. "We accept your invitation and offer our knowledge in the spirit of mutual protection. However, I must emphasize that our greatest strength isn't our weapons or tactics." "Then what is humanity's greatest strength, Captain Savos?" asked the Selphic Counselor. Alina smiled slightly, thinking of her crew who had volunteered to die with her, of Lieutenant Wei who had walked into lethal radiation to save his shipmates, of every human throughout history who had placed the welfare of others above their own survival. "Our greatest strength is that when faced with darkness," she said simply, "we choose to light a candle rather than curse the dark, even when it burns us." The Arcturian phrase for humans, "beautiful monsters," was formally entered into the Concord lexicon that day. But alongside it, a new term emerged, Ton protectors, the species that fights not for conquest, but for others. As the Relentless began its long journey back to Earth, carrying news of humanity's new place in the galactic community, Captain Savos stood on her partly repaired bridge, gazing at the stars that no longer seemed quite so empty or cold. "Set course for home, Lieutenant," she ordered quietly. "We have quite a story to tell."